Episode 3, The First Sign. Mornings at the Sinclair estate had become a loop, quiet, precise, and cold. The grand dining hall glowed under the chandelier's pale light. Silverware gleamed. Plates were perfectly placed. The kind of perfection that suffocates. Evelyne stepped in. Her heels clicked softly against marble. At the far end, Adrian sat, rigid posture, eyes locked on the morning paper, expression unreadable. He didn't look up. Not really. "Good morning," Evelyne offered, barely above a whisper. "Morning." The word came flat, clipped. No warmth, no weight. They sat at opposite ends, with a stretch of empty chairs and distance between them. The only sounds, forks tapping porcelain, the low shuffle of the butler presenting dishes too beautiful to eat. Evelyne stirred her tea. Didn't drink it. The poached eggs cooled untouched. Toast broken, not bitten. Across the table, Adrian flipped a page. His eyes didn't drift, not once. Then, like clockwork, he folded his napkin. "Excuse me," he muttered, already rising, shoes against marble. The door closed. Not a slam, just final. Evelyne stayed behind, fingers resting on the rim of her plate, her eyes on the space he had left behind. Her breath barely moved the silence. She wandered the hallway, one hand trailing along the wallpaper. Her reflection followed her in the framed glass, always a few steps behind. In the sunroom, she sat among lace curtains and golden light, a book resting open in her lap. Her thumb held the page, but her eyes stared through the words. Her gaze caught somewhere far from the ink. Time passed unnoticed. Later, she took up her knitting. Soft rose and ivory threads tangled around her fingers. Her hands moved out of habit, not purpose. The scarf twisted unevenly, like all the others. Still, she folded it gently and placed it in the basket near the hearth, beside the others. Quiet failures tucked away like bruises beneath silk. And then, the garden. She chose the palest pink roses, their soft blush reminding her of a childhood garden long lost to memory. She arranged them with care, in the foyer, in the sitting room, and one small vase placed quietly by Adrian's study door. He never mentioned them. Still, she replaced them when they wilted. Not because she hoped he'd see them, but because she feared he never would. The emptiness didn't ache like loneliness. It pressed against her like glass, invisible, cold, and unbreakable. And inside it, she was becoming unseen. A vast, dimly lit room. Velvet curtains drawn. Moonlight brushes across polished wood and cold marble floors. Evelyne sat at the edge of the bed, back straight, gown soft and ivory against the darkened world around her. The soft rasp of a hairbrush, moving through her long chestnut strands, filled the quiet like a lullaby only she could hear. One stroke, 2, 3, each movement steady, deliberate, ritual, survival. Adrian was not there. Most nights, he lingered elsewhere. The study, where the scent of scotch and parchment lingered long after he was gone, or sometimes the guest room down the hall. His absence was never explained. No excuses, no apologies, just empty space and cold sheets. Evelyne never asked why. She would lie awake, staring at the carved ceiling, her hands clasped over her stomach. Some nights she would hear his footsteps in the corridor, slow and uncertain, pausing outside the door as if debating whether to enter. Her heart would thrum in those moments, hopeful and afraid all at once. But the door never opened. Eventually, she stopped listening for him. She turns away, facing the window. The moonlight pools over the floor, cold and silver. Her nightgown shifts in the breeze that slips between the window cracks. She doesn't pull the blanket higher. She just watches the light. Sometimes she leaves the lamp on, just a little longer than she should, not out of fear, but because darkness felt too honest. Golden afternoon light spills through tall, arched windows, warming the polished floor. Evelyne sits at the grand piano, her posture still, her fingers moving softly across ivory keys. Each note hovers in the air, delicate and deliberate, like memories caught in slow motion. Across the room, the Duchess reclines in her favorite velvet chair, a porcelain cup poised in one hand. Steam curls upward. She closes her eyes briefly, listening. "You play beautifully, my dear," the Duchess said, her voice gentle. Evelyne doesn't look up. "Thank you," she replies gently. "It helps to pass the time." The music continues, low and unhurried, until a faint knock at the door. A maid enters, carrying a sealed envelope on a silver tray. The Duchess opens it with a quiet flick of her wrist. A soft smile rises. "Oh, an invitation from the Royal Museum. A private preview of their newest collection. A courtesy extended to the Sinclair family, of course." Evelyne's music faltered ever so slightly at the mention. She had always loved the museum, its hushed galleries, towering canvases, and the feeling of stepping into another world. The piano fell silent, and she turned slightly in her seat, attentive. "Your father-in-law and I, unfortunately, have engagements we cannot delay," the Duchess continued, folding the letter with deliberate care. Her eyes, however, lingered on Evelyne now, softer, more deliberate. "Why don't you attend in our place, dear, and Adrian shall accompany you." Stillness fell between the notes. Evelyne's heart fluttered, quick and uncertain. "Adrian?" She turned slightly in her seat, brows lifting just a breath. Evelyne blinks, as if the world just tilted half a degree. Of course," she said, her voice light, careful. "If that is your wish, Your Grace." The Duchess gave a small nod, setting her teacup down with a gentle clink. "I believe a little change of scenery might do you both some good." Evelyne placed her fingers once more on the keys. She began to play again. The same melody, but it had shifted. The music now moved slower, more fragile. The notes lingered like questions, not answers. Her gaze drifts to the window. Her thoughts drifted past the room, past the piano, past the sunlight warming her shoulder, toward the possibility of something unknown. The air in the room remained warm, but Evelyne could already feel the wind of change just beyond the window pane, and somewhere in her chest, her heart beat with both hope and hesitation. The hallway held its breath. Only the faint hum of lamplight and the distant tick of a clock broke the stillness. Evelyne stood outside Adrian's study, her hand hovering just above the polished oak door. The lamplight from the wall sconces cast soft shadows across her face, catching the slight furrow in her brow. She had rehearsed the words in her head. It was simple. A message from the Duchess, a scheduled outing. Nothing more. Yet her hand lingered in the air, unmoving, as if the door were not made of wood, but of glass, transparent but unbreakable. Finally, her knuckles brushed the surface. 3 soft knocks, polite, precise, almost apologetic. A pause followed, long enough to make her think he might ignore it. Then his voice came, muffled, low and restrained. "Come in." The door creaked open. Warm lamplight spilled into the corridor. Inside, shelves of books, the scent of ink and old leather, and Adrian, seated behind his desk, posture upright, attention still fixed on parchment. He held a fountain pen in one hand, the ink still fresh on the parchment in front of him. Firelight flickered behind him, casting long shadows. He did not look up. Evelyne stood quietly for a breath longer, the firelight brushing the side of her gown, catching the faint shimmer of embroidery at her waist. Then she spoke. "The Duchess has given instructions." Her voice was quiet, but carried. "Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to the Royal Museum. A new collection is being unveiled. She asked us to attend on the family's behalf." There was a pause. Adrian's pen stilled. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. His eyes, that same pale, icy blue, met hers. Not sharply, not warmly, just plainly, like a curtain had been drawn back for the briefest moment, only to fall again just as quickly. "Very well." And just like that, he looked away. He returned to his pen, lifting it again with a mechanical grace, as if her presence had already been processed and filed away. The moment began to dissolve. Evelyne stayed a little longer. There was so much she could have said about her love for art, about her gratitude, about the strangeness of sharing space with someone and still feeling invisible. But none of it made it past her lips. Her eyes followed the motion of his hand. Precise, practiced, detached. She wondered what it might take to make it tremble. "I'll be ready by noon," she said softly. No answer, only the quiet scratch of the pen, like a door closing without a sound. She turned. The hem of her skirt brushed the wood beneath her feet, the only sound she left behind. As she reached for the door, she moved with the same care as she had when she entered, as though any sudden movement might shatter something unseen. The door clicked closed behind her. She paused, her hand still resting on the handle. She hadn't expected warmth, but somehow, the cold still stung. The morning light spilled in through lace-curtained windows, casting shifting patterns across Evelyne's lap, where a pale rose pouch now lay half-concealed in her hands. She sat in quiet stillness, upright, but not rigid, her gaze drifting between the world beyond the window and the man seated beside her. Between them stretched not space, but silence, the kind that grew roots, anchoring itself deeper with every clatter of the wheels beneath them. Adrian sat with the stiffness of habit, back straight, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the blurred city, beyond the glass. His silence was not new, but today, it carried something sharper. Evelyne opened the pouch with quiet fingers. The soft scent of vanilla and citrus rose like a whisper from childhood. She popped one into her mouth, letting the sweetness melt slowly on her tongue. The taste was like a quiet hug from the past. Her father had always carried sweets like these when they traveled. Every time she sat beside him in a carriage, bored or anxious or sleepy, he would hand her one with a warm chuckle and a wink, saying, "Every journey is sweeter with sugar, darling." A faint smile touched Evelyne's lips. A smile not born of joy, but of remembrance. The kind that makes the heart ache softly, even as it warms. She looked up and saw Adrian still lost in the passing scenery, unreadable. Still, something in her stirred. A flicker of instinct, or maybe defiance. The need to bridge the unbearable distance between them, no matter how small the gesture. She held out the pouch, just a little, a quiet offering. "Would you like one?" Adrian turned toward her. His reaction came in layers. First a pause, then a look. His gaze fell not on her face, but on the pouch. And something shifted. Subtle, but sharp. His shoulders stiffened, his chest stilled. The color in his eyes darkened, clouding like a storm behind glass. A memory had struck him. Violently. The sweetness in the air had twisted. Not warm, but sickening. And with that came the reflex. The shield. The wall. "No," he said. Too fast. Too clipped. The words slicing through the soft air of the carriage like a blade. Evelyne flinched. Not outwardly, just enough to break the smile that had barely begun to form. She drew the pouch back, tucked it gently into her lap. "I see," she murmured. No bitterness, just quiet resignation. She turned her face toward the window, blinking back the sting in her eyes. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the way his tone had sliced the quiet between them, turning it from cold to cruel. Adrian didn't move. His fingers curled around the edge of the seat, white-knuckled. The moment the sweet scent hit his nose, a memory surged. The sharp, terrifying recollection from his childhood. He glanced at Evelyne out of the corner of his eye. She was still, staring out the window, the pouch now hidden beneath folds of fabric. Her profile was soft, but her jaw was clenched. He wanted to speak, to explain, to say it wasn't about you, but the words tangled in his throat, caught between pride and fear, and things long buried. So instead, he said nothing. And the carriage rolled on, quiet, elegant, heavy with all the things left unspoken. The echo of footsteps on marble. A grand hall opened before them. Vaulted ceilings, oil paintings in gilded frames, light spilling in like memory through tall windows. A man in formal attire greeted them with a slight bow. "This way, Lord." And Lady Sinclair. "The East Wing has been prepared for your private viewing." They walked in silence. Evelyne's gaze drifted upward, toward a domed ceiling brushed in gold leaf. The scent of varnish and aged canvas filled the air. Familiar, like pages of a book, long unopened. She walked slowly, taking it all in, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. Each painting whispered a story. A nobleman's grief, a maiden's longing, the fury of gods and monsters. Evelyne leaned in, her eyes tracing brushstrokes, light and shadow. But even as she tried to immerse herself, the earlier carriage moment lingered in the corners of her mind like an unfinished sentence. She slipped her hand into her pocket, fingertips grazing the soft satin pouch again. A quiet habit, a search for comfort. But this time she didn't open it. The scent of citrus and vanilla, once her balm, now felt like something fragile she no longer deserved to offer. She let the pouch be. Adrian walked beside her, always one step behind, never too close. He remained silent, his gaze scanning the artwork, but occasionally it flickered to Evelyne. He noticed the subtle way she leaned on one foot, more than the other, the way her hand lingered near her pocket before dropping again. Guilt gnawed at him. They turned a corner into a new gallery. The tone changed. This gallery was warmer, golden. The paintings here pulsed with emotion, with heat, a stark contrast to the distant elegance of the halls before. Here, the brushstrokes were wilder, the color bolder, the subjects unflinching. Lovers intertwined under moonlight, flesh half-veiled, mouths parted. Goddesses stood bare-chested in triumph or sorrow, their gazes daring the viewer to flinch. Bodies curved, lips met, limbs tangled in the chaos of desire. Evelyne froze. Her cheeks flushed a deep rose, her eyes widening in alarm as she instinctively looked away. "Oh," she muttered under her breath, her hand flying to her collarbone. She stepped back a pace, flustered and rigid, her lashes fluttering with confusion. Her fingers fussed at her sleeve, trying to anchor herself in decorum while her thoughts whirled. Adrian caught the look, and something unexpected stirred in him, a smirk he didn't allow to fully form. She looked so flustered, so earnest in her attempt not to look while clearly having seen too much. It was amusing. There was a softness to the way her fingers fiddled with her sleeve, the way her lashes fluttered as she stared pointedly at the floor. His lips twitched, just slightly. But he masked it quickly, clearing his throat and gesturing toward the next hallway. "Let's continue. The landscapes are in the West Gallery." Evelyne nodded quickly, too quickly. She didn't meet his eyes. Her face was still tinted rose as she turned and walked ahead, putting distance between herself and the heat of the room. Adrian followed, his face composed once more. But inwardly, he was still thinking about the way her expression had shifted, like dawn breaking across porcelain. She was delicate, yes, but not fragile, and he was beginning to notice that. Golden light spilled through the high-arched windows, draping the marble floor in warm hues, as if the afternoon sun had decided to paint the gallery itself. Here, in this quiet corridor of timeless landscapes and gilded serenity, Evelyne's footsteps slowed, her vision tilting ever so slightly. The colors around her blurred, and the polished floor beneath her seemed to sway. She faltered. A soft gasp escaped her lips as her knees gave way. But before the marble could meet her, strong hands caught her. Fast, steady, instinctive. Adrian. His arms enclosed her without hesitation, one hand firm at her back, the other bracing her waist. The pressure was careful, but unwavering, like someone trying to hold together something too precious, too fragile to drop. His voice, low, urgent. "Evelyne." She blinked slowly, lashes fluttering as her vision tried to right itself. Her hand reached up, searching, and found her fingers curling instinctively into the fabric of his coat, right above his heart. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her breath betrayed her. It came in short, uneven waves. "Just dizzy. It'll pass." Adrian's hands remained, one at her waist, one at her back. Not possessive, not hesitant, just steady. His eyes searched her face. She looked delicate in that moment, too pale, lips parted, brow damp with the faintest sheen. "This isn't nothing," he said, the furrow between his brows deepening. "You should see a doctor." But she shook her head, stubbornness rising like a shield. "It's nothing serious. I've had this before. I just need a moment." Adrian opened his mouth, perhaps to insist, perhaps to argue. But the moment was interrupted. Footsteps, fast but measured. The head curator approached. "My lord, I apologize, but your opinion is requested in the West Gallery regarding a disputed provenance." Adrian didn't move. His arm remained around Evelyne, his jaw tense with indecision. But then, Evelyne felt the shift in his body, the hesitation, and with quiet grace, she straightened in his hold. Slowly, her hand slid from his coat. "Go," she said softly, her voice steadier now. "I'll be all right, truly." Her smile was faint, but real. Adrian studied her face for a second longer, reluctant, an unfamiliar tension tugging at his chest, then gave a short nod. "I'll return quickly," he said almost gruffly. "Stay seated if you feel faint, again." She smiled faintly. "Yes." With one last glance, he turned and followed the curator. Evelyne remained in place for a moment, her heart still pounding. Not from the dizziness, but from how tightly he had held her, and how briefly safe it had felt. The hush of the gallery settled around Evelyne once more, as she wandered slowly to the next room. Her steps were measured, her fingers trailing lightly along the edge of a gilded frame as she approached a large oil painting, a twilight garden, filled with lilacs and shadows, kissed by moonlight. She moved slowly, deliberately. Her hand hovered near the satin pouch at her waist. A reflex, then a sound. Heels on polished marble, sharp, intentional, coming closer. A scent arrived first, too sweet, too knowing. Then the woman appeared. She moved like a cat, fluid, poised, and very aware of the effect she had. Her scarlet-brown hair tumbled in soft waves over her shoulders, perfectly arranged yet intentionally undone. Her gown was a bold crimson with gold embroidery dancing across the bodice like fire. The diamond choker at her neck shimmered with every movement, drawing attention to her poised throat and regal posture. Her emerald eyes, sharp as glass, locked onto Evelyne with amused interest. She stopped beside Evelyne, poised, smiling. Not warmth. "You look familiar," the woman said, her voice low and velvety, sweet at the surface but carrying something far more dangerous beneath. Evelyne met her gaze with polite composure, her tone carefully measured. "I don't believe we've met before." She extended a hand, gloved in black velvet. "Lady Cassandra." The name landed with the weight of a drawn blade. Evelyne curtsied, her palm cool against the glove. "Lady Evelyne Sinclair." There was a flicker, brief but unmistakable, in Cassandra's expression. The name Sinclair tasted bitter on her tongue, though she disguised it with a light chuckle and an elegant tilt of the head. "Ah, that Evelyne." Her smile widened, the way a predator smiles. "I'm quite close to Adrian," she said, her voice dipped in honey, but sharpened like glass. "We've shared many fond memories." The air between them tensed, invisible threads pulled taut. Evelyne's hand drifted toward her side. Her voice stayed calm. "How fortunate for you," she replied, her tone still soft, but now faintly chilled. Cassandra's gaze fell, eyes catching the pouch, the shape of something sweet. "Oh?" A soft laugh followed. "A sweet tooth?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You might want to keep that hidden. Adrian hates sweets, you know. Always has. Used to give him the worst anxiety." The words struck like a slap with no hand. Evelyne didn't respond at first. The pain wasn't from the comment itself, but from what it revealed. Cassandra knew these things. She wielded them like trophies, and Evelyne did not. Her hand closed tightly over the pouch, shielding it with instinct, as though protecting not the contents, but the meaning she'd assigned to them. "I see," she murmured, the words catching faintly in her throat. Footsteps approached. Before Cassandra could say more, a voice cut sharply through the quiet air. "Evelyne." Adrian's tone was unmistakable. Cool, but layered with an edge of protectiveness. He strode into the room, his icy blue eyes settling on the two women, and then narrowing ever so slightly at the sight of Cassandra. Cassandra turned toward him with effortless poise, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Adrian," she purred. "What a pleasant surprise." But Adrian didn't smile. His attention remained on Evelyne, her stiff posture, the way her eyes wouldn't meet his, the pouch now tucked behind her back. Something inside him tightened, and Cassandra noticed. Not words, not closeness, but concern. The kind that meant Evelyne mattered, and that changed everything. "Cassandra." His voice came like a cold wind through stone halls. Not loud, but final. Cassandra turned. Scarlet silk whispered around her legs. Her smile bloomed instantly, radiant and sharp-edged, the kind of smile meant for audiences, not intimacy. She tilted her chin slightly, as if basking in an attention she had long expected. "My family also received an invitation," she said lightly, her voice gilded in charm, yet firm beneath the surface. "It seems the museum wished to honor several noble patrons this evening." Her gaze flicked to Evelyne with just the faintest hint of challenge, a woman laying quiet claim to a space that wasn't entirely hers. Adrian said nothing, not to Cassandra. His silence carried more weight than any response. His expression, carved in restraint, gave nothing away, but his jaw clenched faintly, and the tension in his shoulders betrayed the storm just beneath the surface. Then, he moved. Not toward Cassandra. Past her, toward Evelyne. He stopped just beside her, and for a moment, he hesitated. His hand hovered for a moment, hesitating near the small of her back, then rested there gently, a silent yet unmistakable gesture of protection. "We're leaving," he said firmly, not sparing Cassandra another glance. Evelyne blinked, startled not by his words, but by the warmth behind them. A warmth that didn't match the coldness with which he had addressed Cassandra. She didn't speak, only gave a soft nod, almost imperceptible, as though afraid it would shatter the fragile moment between them. Evelyne allowed herself to be guided away, her steps small and unsure. Behind them, the stillness reassembled. Cassandra remained in place, her smile perfectly intact, not a crack on her flawless exterior. But her eyes, still trained on their retreating figures, had changed. There was no more amusement there, only a flicker of something darker. Recognition, calculation, a shift in the rules of a game she had once believed she controlled. Her lips tightened, just slightly, and then parted again into a smile that no longer reached her eyes. As Adrian and Evelyne disappeared through the archway, the gallery's silence returned, but it was no longer peaceful. It was watchful. The carriage rattled softly over cobbled streets, the muted rhythm of wheels and hooves the only sound between them. Evelyne sat near the window, her cheek resting lightly against the cool glass. Outside, the sky was tinged with gray, the last light of day bleeding into dusk. But she hardly saw it. Her thoughts were elsewhere, caught in a web spun from a single voice, velvet, sharp, cruel in its sweetness. "We've shared many fond memories," the words echoed. "Adrian hates sweets." The sweetness that once brought her comfort now sat like a weight in her pocket. Her fingers curled around the small satin pouch, hidden beneath the folds of her skirt. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she pulled it out, gazing at it as if it had betrayed her. Then, wordlessly, she tucked it away, again, deeper this time, where neither he nor anyone else could see it. Beside her, Adrian sat rigid, his posture sharp, tense. His arms were crossed tightly, his gaze angled toward the opposite window. But his eyes weren't watching anything at all. They just rested there, empty. Except when they didn't. And yet, every so often, his eyes flicked sideways, stealing glances at her. Evelyne looked tired, more than tired. Pale, distant, folded in on herself. Her shoulders had slumped. The light was gone from her face. Even the way she breathed felt smaller. He watched. He listened. He ached. He wanted to say something. Anything. But the words felt too heavy. Or too late, or not enough. What could he say? That Cassandra meant nothing? That the past didn't matter? That her sweet and small and so very her, wasn't foolish? His chest ached with a tight, unfamiliar frustration. Not at her. Never. At her. But at himself. For the silence. For the look on her face when he'd snapped. For letting Cassandra's presence steal the warmth from this day. Evelyne didn't look at him. But her heart was beating fast, aching in that quiet way, when you wish someone would reach across the silence and say something. Anything. Still, neither of them spoke. Two figures seated side by side beneath a velvet ceiling of stars not yet visible. Close in distance. Worlds apart. And yet, somewhere in that shared silence, something stirred. Fragile, unspoken. A tension. A longing. The very first beat of a storm neither dared name, and neither of them knew if it would bring rain, or fire,